I decided to make a video speaking to sensitivity, radical sensitivity. I know a lot of people on my channel who interact with me, people who come to events, people who come to private sessions, people that I've met in the various meanderings I've had through life, who experience what one could call a kind of radical sensitivity. And in short, this video is going to be saying that sensitivity is not a problem when we learn to embrace it, and when we learn somehow over time to allow it. It is actually, it has the capacity to be a blessing, in disguise of course, but a blessing. Sensitivity, feeling radically, being sensitive to our environment, being sensitive to other people, being sensitive to ourselves, being sensitive to our body system, being all over so sensitive it's almost like it's extremely difficult to function in this world. And you see, I remember somebody, who said that in relationship they were tormented by a partner who accused them of being too sensitive. And I think many of us have had that. I would include myself as being what we call a sensitive. I think most people are sensitive one way or another, but some are blessed or cursed. Certainly often feels like the second, to almost constantly have this experience of sensitivity. And how do we live with sensitivity? Well, in the world that we're in the world that we live in, and just in reality, in existence in a way, it's not culture specific, in a way it's not gender specific, it's not the times that we're in necessarily, although it can be aggravated or accentuated by the times that we're in, but to just be in existence and sensitive feels like a problem. And it feels like if only, for many people, if only I could get over this sense of sensitivity that I have, then I'd be able to function much better in this life. And so there starts a kind of momentum, or even a story. I'm not saying that's a bad thing in a way, but it becomes a sort of an intention or a desire or a mission or a purpose to somehow get rid of this sensitivity, so that I can live a different, a better, a stronger life. So therefore, we're kind of in argument. We're trying to become something that we're not. Trying to be somebody that we're not. Here is this sensitivity for whatever reason, yeah. It's come along and it's sort of followed us around all this time, and has caused its problems apparently, and handicaps us in some sort of way, or inhibits us, let's say, in some sort of way. And then we realize or come up with an idea or read or something, that the sensitivity is the problem. And so therefore, what is it? What's the agenda? What's inside trying to do something about this sensitivity? What is it? Trying to harden up in life like the others. If only I could become harder and or tougher, then I wouldn't be so sensitive, and I'd be able to function much better in this existence, which seems to be full of tough people, or people who are not as sensitive as me. So sensitivity starts to become a real problem, a real burden. And it's not easy, right? It's not easy, sensitivity. If you're one of those sensitives, and a lot of people are, then it does come with a kind of difficulty, because there's a sort of rawness to sensitivity. There's a thought to sensitivity, but there's actually a raw sort of body sensation. Nervous system can be jangling, the whole of the organism, the whole of the entity can be kind of, like feeling things so strongly, that it feels like it's impossible to bear. I mean, a lot of people exit this existence, suicide, because they feel too sensitive for the harshness, if you like, of this world. And that's not to do with the world, it's just to do with the nature of existence. And this is can be a big existential problem for people. And that's why I sort of want to kind of dig it out in a way, and expose it to the light, and expose this whole dilemma that we have to the light, because I think that sensitivity gets a bad rap, and isn't really talked about. I mean, it can be talked about in that I've got 3, ways for you to deal with your sensitivity, sort of thing. And I'm not going down that road. I'm not offering you 3 ways of doing anything. I just want to kind of bring it to the surface, so that it stops just being a problem to get rid of, and actually it becomes almost a radical kind of superpower, if you like, not in a sort of, not in a ridiculous way, but just by learning somehow, or turning towards somehow one's own sensitivity, and saying, yes, yeah, I'm feeling this. I am this sensitive. I am this sensitive to the world. I am this sensitive to other people. I am this sensitive to my own experience. I am this sensitive. And so what? If you like. Not so what to other people, but so, what does that mean about me? Does it actually mean anything about me? Does it actually inhibit who I am? Because maybe the sensitivity itself, is the kind of, is a governing principle in my life. Maybe the sensitivity has an intelligence inside it that is saying to me, do this, do that. Take care here. Don't go there. Stay away from some of the things that cause such a radical sensitivity. Just learning, what I'm talking about in a way, is learning to listen to it, not fight with it. Learning to love it and not argue with it so much. Do you see what I'm saying? Is it really such a problem, or is it that we feel that it's such a problem? Because they're 2 different things. They're 2 different things. We're kind of thinking we shouldn't be feeling so radically sensitive. But we only feel like that if we're making some interpretation of it. We've decided secretly somehow that it shouldn't be like this. Because what? It should be like that. And then, I ask, what does that mean? If I shouldn't be like this, well then really I should be like that. And what is that? Who is that? Who is that idea that we have about ourselves that we should be somehow other than the way that we are? And this is not an easy turnaround, but it is a turnaround. When I realised for myself, that I could actually carry on fighting with my sensitive nature. Of my vulnerability, my tenderness, my sort of fear, if you like. When I realised I could spend the rest of my days fighting with all of that, or else I could say, I'm going to try something different here. I'm going to try and see if I can love it all, and that I can include it all, and I cannot imagine or not try and pretend that I should be somebody other than the person that I am. Simple. Simple. If I'm sensitive, I'm sensitive. I don't have to interpret that, and I don't actually have to take behavioural actions kind of based on that. Oh, well, if I'm so sensitive, then I'm like, I have to be, really careful. Or, yeah, maybe you have to be careful. But you also have more strength. Because the strength that you were using to fight yourself can actually go into supporting yourself. That's a radical shift. That's a radical shift. To start serving your sensitivity, start loving your sensitivity, and to start, kind of embracing your sensitivity. Embracing. There's got a lot of power in it, because then you sort of stop separating yourself into different elements of yourself. Some are wanted, some are unwanted. No, all is welcome. All is welcome. It's the only way to get to a kind of holistic, loving naturalness with ourselves, is to welcome everything. It's all welcome. You don't have to interpret it in a way that says, and I'm this sort of person, I'm that sort of person. You're not that sort of person. You're not that sort of person, or that sort of person, or that sort of person. You're barely a person. You're sort of a blend of things. An ever-changing river that has a kind of stream of natural intelligence pouring through it that manifests as with certain characteristics. But you're not really a type of person. And it can change. It changes. We're changeable. Don't fix yourself. Don't try and fix yourself in space and time. Be the ever-flowing effervescence of infinite potential that you are. And include your sensitivity in that. And stop fighting it so much. And learn to love it a little bit more. That's what I wanted to say about sensitivity. It's your friend.